Hey guys, Steve Foster here. Hope you're having a good May so far. Happy May. And I know it's a busy time of year for educators. I can definitely attest to that. As I've mentioned to a few of you guys, I've got several different things going on, whether it's my students going to their National History Day competition, that the state competition is coming up on Saturday, or I'm actually going to be looking for a new position. My family and I are looking to relocate a little bit more of a suburban / rural setting. So kind of in the middle of a job search for my next landing point professionally. So it's definitely a busy time. So I apologize for the slight delay, but I also know that I'm preaching to the choir, and I appreciate all of you guys taking the time out of your busy schedule to be able to join me live here. I know I've got Chris and his family that are here live, as well as Ian. So thank you, and we're going to go ahead and get started. I have heard from Chris that you guys can see me, so that's good. Ian, I'm still waiting, so if you're not able to reach me and see this live stream, then you can always send any questions that you have and view the live stream in a delayed mode or later on, if that works for you, then that's fine as well. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share here what's on my screen. So let me go ahead and do that. Let me share that here. Okay, it looks like... Okay, no, not that one, this one. And then Ian, just go ahead and let me know if if and when you're able to see this, so I can get confirmation on that. I hope that you had a chance to see orientation number 1, which was from last year. So it did have some outdated information as far as the context of our group, but the majority of the content in there was consistent from 2017 as far as a lot of the kind of pre-trip orientation details, information about Guatemala, and etc. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, please do so at your earliest convenience, or at least make sure that you are able to take a look at that before you head out to Guatemala. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a few different announcements related to nuts and bolts, as well as we're going to be visiting the idea of culture shock and what that might mean as you embark on this journey, as we embark on this journey together. A few resources that may be helpful for you. We're going to get into your homestay groups where you're going to be staying, and there's some pictures of the space that you'll be able to take a look at in order to prepare yourself for the space that you're going to be staying at as far as the families. Some information about our partner school. It's called El Hato, that we're going to be spending some time with, and that includes the kids. When I brought my daughter Iris there two summers ago, she had, I would say, an equally, if not more valuable experience than a lot of the adults in being able to take part in the class as if she was a student. So for our little travelers that we have with us this year, that's something that that I think will be a really great... Okay, we got Ian. Nice. Glad to have you, Ian. So we're going to take a look at some information related to El Hato, the Guatemala School that we'll be partnering with and that we've been partnering with for the past 3 years. And then we'll be doing some question and answers. So throughout the course of this, if you do have questions that come up, we won't necessarily be able to take a look at those questions. A lot of times they do get answered as we go through this session. But I will, I've got my phone here, my iPhone as well, that I'll be taking a look at my email towards the end. So if you do have questions that come up, make sure that you are sending those to the Spanish for Educators main info address that's listed right there, as far as any questions that do come up. A shameless plug, first of all, please make sure that you, and I know that I believe Ian has already done this, so thank you. But for the other participants that we have, please make sure that you are joining up with the Facebook page. And more than anything, once you are down in Guatemala, that gives us an opportunity to remain in touch, to be able to share photos, to kind of stay connected in that way on the social media platforms. So that's the place that I'm hoping that as long as you are on Facebook, to be able to like the page. Oh, by the way, this slide deck has already been put into the folder. There's a Google folder that's been shared with you all that has a lot of resources that will help you as you prepare for the trip. So this slide deck, as well as the one that describes the families, they have already been put into that folder. So feel free, if you need to, for example, click on any type of links or revisit anything, that you're taking a look at that folder. And I'm happy to help you access that folder. And maybe you have a Gmail that I shared it with a personal and you'd like me to share it with your work related Gmail account or something like that. So I'm happy to look into that as well. Graduate credits. So this will be our second year partnering with Western State University in Gunnison. Fully accredited master's program. It's a graduate level course for three credits, $375, which is for 3 credits a really great deal. And so I would encourage, I know that Chris has already mentioned his interest in taking those credits. It does involve a little bit of extra coursework as far as, maintaining a reflection journal and preparing a lesson plan and some of the main things that you usually will be asked to do with this type of graduate course. But when it comes down to it, they did pay a lot of attention to your time that you're going to be spending in Guatemala, and also realizing that and honoring that it's going to be a lot of time that you're going to be giving of your time with something that is in the lens of education and from the point of view of an educator. So it's really modest as far as the amount of actual coursework that you need to turn in. So I would recommend that you consider that and let me know if you are interested. And for Chris, I'll be sending you next steps here in the next week or two. So let's just talk about culture shock for a little while. There's a good visual that we go off of that is projected on the screen here, as far as on one axis you have your state of mind, and on the other axis you have the duration of your experience in a different culture. And so as you can see, there's going to be the honeymoon period when you first arrive, that everything's going to seem great and everything's going to be just going along swimmingly. And for a 2-week program, this is something that you may not actually ever come out of that phase, as far as the honeymoon phase. Typically, this visual was actually crafted for, it was either a semester or a year-long program for undergraduate students. So there may not be the opportunity for you to go into the actual culture shock mode or the adjustment mode. That's typically for something that is a longer program. But there may become the time, especially once you get into week number 2, where you start to have a little bit less of a honeymoon type state of mind and start to realize some of the ramifications of the differences in culture that you're a part of. And so that's where, as we kind of talked about a little bit with the first orientation, when we talk about Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, to be able to realize that as long as you're not in the danger zone, as long as you're still uncomfortable but not severely uncomfortable, that's where the real learning takes place. And so culture shock, while it may lead to less of a state of mind, less of a positive state of mind, it's also where you really do get a lot of the positive growth as far as your cultural competency, where you start to, without even realizing it sometimes, make some real headway with your Spanish, which is something that, with a 2-week program, just to be transparent, it is really intense. So there's going to be things to do every single day. We have a pretty packed schedule. And 4 hours of private Spanish lessons seems like quite a bit, and it is, and it's pretty intense. But if you're a totally elementary Spanish speaker, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you're going to be, fluent by the time that you return back to the U.S. That's something that even myself, having gone down to Guatemala regularly over the past 15 years, I still sometimes question my fluency. I definitely would say I'm conversational, but that crisis mode and culture shock is something where you may all of a sudden realize that you are, dreaming in Spanish, even if it's just for a short dream when you're sleeping, or you're able to have that conversation at the dinner table with your host family that maybe you weren't able to do the first week. And so those are some of the small victories that you need to celebrate as you are going through this process. Oh, I guess this should have been in the nuts and bolts section, but there will be times that I will be posting pictures on Facebook and maybe taking some pictures and putting it onto the Spanish4Educators website that will have your photos on them. So if that's something that you, for whatever reason, don't want to have happen, then that's totally fine. Just make sure that you are communicating that to me before we head out as far as opting out of that. No hard feelings from this point of view, but just want to make sure that you do realize that as long as I don't hear from you, then that is something that you can expect. Going along with the resources side of things, there is a really neat, and this is mainly for high school, but also middle school, depending on your students. But there is a primary source activity where, for those of you, depending on where you're at in the Rigoberta Menchú book, I Rigoberta Menchú, you may have come across information related to the revolution that took place, where there was a there was a left-leaning leader that was democratically elected, and then the CIA, with support from the CIA, that it was during the middle of the Cold War, and that leader was ousted. And so the CIA provided these different classified documents to the movement to be able to ouster this left-leaning leader. And so there's one of which is called, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's called How to Assassinate, I think it is. And it has some really interesting and just shocking information in there as far as what the CIA was doing to support the movement to remove this democratically elected left-leaning leader. And so I have used it with my middle school students in the past, and it's really, it's a great primary source. That's a major Common Core standard. And so especially for those people that are social studies teachers or people that just are interested in the lesson, then feel free to click on this slide. And again, the slide deck is in the Google folder that is available to everybody. Another resource, my cousin, her name is Dr. Krishan Olson. She did her PhD research on the effects of war on children. And so it's kind of hard to see. I'm not sure what happened with this graphic here, but it's called Youth Without Sanctuary, The New Ethics of Humanitarianism in Post-War Guatemala. So after the 40-plus year civil conflict that Guatemala saw that ended in 1997, the Guatemala was changed. And we talked about this a little bit in the first orientation session, but you will notice when you go there that, for example, especially with that age group that was affected directly by the conflict, a lot of the males especially are not present because they were killed in the conflict. And so we have a lot of families that are single parent households because of the fact that that the fathers were killed in the conflict. And so my cousin did her research based on the effects that has had on modern Guatemala. And it's a little bit dated. It's from about 10 years ago. And, when the conflict ended in 1997, that's also a little dated, where now we're in 2018. So we're talking about 20 years plus. So it looks a little different now versus the first ever time that I went to Guatemala in 1996, when there were literally, regiments that were on the street when I arrived at the airport. And there wasn't any live action that I saw or anything like that, but I definitely saw military presence in Guatemala. So it's really interesting PhD research that you're welcome to. So one of the main things that we're going to get to right now is your groups for the family homestay. And so I'm super grateful that Blanca Solades and a lot of you guys have not met, but interacted with Blanca. I know that Ian is taking Skype lessons with Blanca in preparation to come to Guatemala with a little bit more heightened Spanish awareness. And then I know that Chris has been interacting with Blanca and her daughter, Sori, who is studying to become an English teacher. So her English is a lot better than Blanca's. But so I know that Chris has been talking with Sori about the post-trip and travel arrangements and things like that. So anyways, they have been really diligent and really great as far as arranging a lot of this. And so the families that we have are also incredible. I've stayed with a couple of the families, and they're great and super welcoming, and like Guatemalan people in general, just very, very kind and warm-hearted, great cooks and comfortable spaces. And so we tried to match people on a few different areas, some of the preferences that you shared with us. We actually, since we do have a couple of families, we obviously made sure to put the families together, so you don't have to worry about that. You're going to be staying with your family. And then with a couple of the non-family single travelers, we also were fairly cognizant as far as a lot of these areas. So if you do have any questions or concern, they're not set in stone or anything like that. So the quicker that we can hear those questions and concerns, the better. Please just email myself. Tiffany is also kind of behind the scenes, but it's probably better if you just email myself directly, which is that info direct address. So before I get to the actual groups and a little bit of information about each of the host families, please consider that Guatemala is a developing country, like we talked about in the first orientation session. Most houses in Antigua and especially Guatemala as a whole have only one toilet. So a lot of the houses that you're going to be going to have multiple toilets. And part of that is because one of the ways that a lot of the families in Antigua get their subsistence and make their living is by hosting families in this way. So a lot of the families that we work with are retired, but they also do depend on the income of hosting families. And so they've been able to, over the years, do some remodels of their house and get additional toilets, for example, and bathrooms. But all homes don't have screens on the windows. So that's one thing that we put on the packing list, which we'll get into in a little bit. If you're able to even just go to REI or Target, or, there's a lot of different outdoor shops that have just the base bug nets. If that's something, if you're kind of a bug phobia type person, you might want to think about bringing that with you. And then also there is a market that I'll point out to you guys when we get there that has citronella candles that, obviously safety first. We did have, not with our group, but there was a fire that was pretty dramatic a couple of years ago that you always need to be careful with. The fire infrastructure, firefighting and that sort of stuff is not that strong in Guatemala. So, but yeah, there are ways to be able to go against that, but no screens on window is something that you do need to get used to. So there's some precautions that you can take for that. And then in many of the homes you will have, and this is fairly consistent with the Latina culture, you'll have extended families that will live together. So with a lot of the families, you'll have, whether it be grandparents, it will be their house, and then they'll have their kids and grandkids at times. You will also have a lot of visitors. So whether it's, I know with one of the host families that I've stayed with before quite a bit, they have their family that comes over quite a bit, which is great as far as the cultural piece, as far as getting to know local Guatemalans and that sort of thing. So, and then on the internet side of thing, if your house does have internet, it's not that great, just to be completely honest. You can send email, but if you expect to do like your FaceTime conversations or any type of video streaming or anything like that, then it's probably not the best option. And so the Guatemala School that we work with also does offer a limited amount of free internet usage at one of the internet cafes, and it's super cheap. I think to have like a good broadband internet connection possibility, it is like maybe $1 an hour or something like that. So we did have an admin that needed to do some work that wasn't on the teacher schedule. So that person needed to do some work when she was down there. And so she just spent $1 an hour to be able to use the internet cafe. And then the Spanish school that we work with also does offer wireless internet that you can take advantage of before your Spanish classes, after your Spanish classes, or during the break. But yeah, so a lot of the families do have internet, but it's not necessarily that good or strong. And then a couple other things, what to expect as far as no more than 2 adults per bedroom, and each person will have your own bed if you're sharing with somebody. The only exception to that is if you're going with your spouse. And so if you are traveling with your spouse, then you will either, most likely you will have a large double or queen bed for you and your spouse. But there is a chance that you'll be in the same room, but you'll just be on single beds. And then as far as bathroom sharing, we really try to stress with families that we, don't want more than 4 total participants or people sharing a bathroom. And then we do try to maintain fairly transparent communication with our families as far as some of the dietary expectations, as far as making sure that you're still getting your proteins and making sure that you're receiving a well-balanced meal schedule. You do get meals offered. 3 meals per day are included within your tuition. And the only exception to that, we talked about this a little bit in the orientation, is on Sundays. The families are working super hard when they have participants. And so that's one thing, especially with the strong Catholic ties, is that with kind of the holy day of Sunday, where it's more of a day of rest, as well as, going to church and that sort of thing. So you won't be getting any meals on Sundays, but we do have some alternates and some recommendations and suggestions and some kind of unofficial meals that we'll mention to you guys, as far as that you can take advantage of if you want, or you can go exploring and find something that you think that you might want as well. Or if you have those cravings, as far as, I know there's a sushi place in Antigua that I've never been, because, if I'm going to have sushi, I'm not going to get it in Guatemala, but I have heard that it's pretty good. And we've had some participants in the past that they have that, type of food that that's kind of their comfort area. And so that's what they do on the Sunday that we're there. When you do arrive in Antigua on Sunday, the first Sunday that you get there, that you arrive from the U.S., we do ask families to offer some sort of a snack to you. So depending on your arrival, depending on when you're coming in to, bring in your stuff and meet your family, most likely they will also be offering you some sort of a sandwich or something on that Sunday that you arrive in Guatemala. But other than that, it is no meals on Sundays. Okay, so without further ado, and another thing that's great about this cohort is that it's a fairly small cohort. And so one of the negatives of that is I'm not probably going to be able to bring my daughter or my family, just because of the ramifications of that, as far as, income and for Spanish4Educators as a whole and that sort of thing. But I think we're going to really get to know each other really well and have some really great conversations as we're reflecting throughout this experience. So Chris's family is going to be staying with Hilda. I'm going to be staying with Elsa. Nate and Ian are going to be staying with Rosalinda, who also happens to live very close to Amparo, which is where the Bartlett McPhee family will be staying. Amparo is also, she's kind of my Guatemalan mother in a way. So Amparo is actually the host family that I've stayed with the most, and it's a great space. They're all great spaces, but I wanted to share the love of Amparo with Kate and Colin and Annie. So on this, and this is Rosalinda, which is Nate and Ian. On this slide deck, it has a description of just kind of a base description of the family. And this was put together by Blanca and another woman that I've worked with in the past that has helped out with the families. So it has kind of a profile of the household as well as the address. There is also a Google map that is on the there's a Google map that is on the shared Google folder that has an exact location for these families in relation to some of the other points of interest that you're going to need to know about. So I'd encourage you to also go onto that Google map because I've dropped some pins on there as far as where all the families are, and also where our meeting point is for when we need transportation, as well as the Spanish school that we work with, which is called La Union, as well as, the supermarket and the banks and different things like that. So the great thing about that is that it's all very close. And Antigua is, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, or at the first orientation session. It's a traditional Spanish colonial town. And so the original town was 8 blocks by 8 blocks squared. And so so beyond that, it's a little bit bigger than that now, but the majority of the stuff that you're going to need is going to be within that 8 by 8 blocks square. And so we try to make it so all the families are within 2 blocks of our meeting point, as well as 3 blocks of the Spanish school. And so that's something that we really feel that's important as far as being able to get around timely and safely. And in that orientation, like we talked about on the in Antigua orientation, which is one thing that we talked about a little bit on the orientation number 1, we will have a walking tour that will orient you physically to the space once you're there. So we will pick you up from your host family the first day for that orientation. And then any subsequent day, if you're kind of a directionally challenged person, we're happy to pick you up and follow the following days as well, until you kind of have a hang of it. So as you can see, beautiful spaces, charming little internal courtyards, and in a lot of cases, like with Hilda and Amparo and also Rosalinda, they have also courtyards that are on the second level. Like a lot of times it's called the terraza, which is the upstairs courtyard. And so as you can see, a lot of great accommodations. Here is my host mother, Elsa, which I'm sure that you guys really don't care about that much, but this slide deck is also available, like I said, on the Google folder that you have access to. Finally, and I think that we're pretty good time schedule here. Yeah. So our partner school for the 2018 cohort is a school called El Hato. The official name is Escuela Oficial Rural Mixta Jose Ignacio Ortiz Vides. And the name of the principal is Patricia Toledo. Amazing woman, and really grateful for the partnership that we've had with them over the last 5 years. We've been with El Hato from the beginning, and we love this school. It's an incredible school. It's in the outskirts of Antigua, so it does take a little bit of time to be able to get there. And when I say a little bit of time, if you're from a urban area and you're thinking about traffic and that sort of thing, you're like, oh man, is it going to take like an hour and a half? No, I'm talking like 20 minutes. So 15, 20 minutes, depending on, there is a little bit of traffic on one of the little stretches, but you kind of have to go up this hill. And so it's a really scenic drive too, because you kind of go up on the mountain to get to El Hato. And so yeah, 15, 20 minutes to get there. And then we spend about 2 hours there working and collaborating with our collaborating educators and with Patti, the principal, as well as a couple of other administrators. And there's another visiting organization that does some work there. And they've built up the library really nicely and that sort of thing. So great kids. They have a passion for the arts. And so there's a woman there who is the PE teacher, who also incorporates a lot of dance into her physical education instruction. And so around the time that we're there every year, they're working on this dance performance that they actually bring to a competition. And they've won the competition before. They're really good. And it's also obviously very cute. So that's one of the cool things, is to be able to take a look at their practicing for this competition and that sort of thing. So, but as you can see from the picture here, it's also an indigenous community where you'll see a lot of the children are dressed in a lot of the traditional Mayan attire. But you have a mix. You have some kids that'll show up in, jeans and a t-shirt. So there's definitely a lack of resources, which is one of the things that we try to shoot for in our partnership with El Hato, is to be able to provide them with what they need as far as in-kind donations, as far as material resources. We don't pay them any cash money. We want to make sure that the money that is paid goes towards in-kind material donations for the teachers, as well as a small percentage that goes to the central office for supplies like toner for their one printer that they have and that sort of thing. So, but we've worked with them for a long time. I trust them. Pati is amazing. Elvira is the 6th grade teacher who also is the assistant principal, and she's great too. So whenever Pati has some meeting that she has to go to or something like that, then Elvira is the main point of contact. And I think that it's going to be a really great experience for you guys. So there is a document on the shared folder that talks about these in-kind donations. And so I've put together a list right here of some of the common items of need that will come up. We ask our collaborating teachers to fill out a list for us because sometimes needs change. And so from year to year, it may shift a little bit. And I have not gotten those specific lists yet, but I can tell you that this list right here is kind of the grand big list of things that will come up time and time again. And with your tuition, there is, for each participant, including the children, there is a $35 donation that is in your name that will go directly to your teacher that you work with. So that's going to be materials that will include supplies that your teacher, your collaborating teacher, has requested. And then, so that's that's $20 of that goes towards your teacher, and then $15 goes towards the administrative office. And I know Colin and Kate and Ian are all on the administrative side, whether principal or district level. And so, I would love to say that you'd be able to shadow Pati, who is the principal there. That's not realistic because we have tried that before with principals that we've had and admin level participants. And Pati is out of the building a lot, as I'm sure you guys can empathize with, as far as going to various district level meetings. And, the level of bureaucracy in Guatemala is definitely pretty high as far as a lot of that kind of stuff goes. So, we have found that it's better for our admin participants to be able to also be paired up with a teacher, also be in the classroom working with students. And we also feel that that's something that is a better impact, not only with your collaboration with that teacher and those students, but also what you get out of the experience from a cultural standpoint. So every teacher will be paired up with every educator that we have will be paired up with a teacher in Guatemala. This is a kindergarten through, here we go. This is a kindergarten through 6th grade, pre-K, preschool through 6th grade school. So while we do try to match your grade level with a similar grade, there's two things that play into that. First of all, they only go through 6th grade, and that is total. So if they do want to continue their education, there are a few different technical school tracks. Like if you want to become a teacher, there's a next step as far as, becoming a teacher and, the medical field and different things like that. There's also a university in Guatemala City that a lot of people will go to eventually. But that's stuff that's kind of not the norm necessarily. So if you are, for example, I know we have a high school, I think it's Colin, actually. I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier, who is the high school woodshop teacher. So that's going to be pretty hard to match you up with a high school woodshop teacher. If actually in El Hato, it's impossible. So for, whether it be for Colin or other people that are not necessarily able to be matched up with the similar grade level, I just ask for you to maintain an open mind and also realize that it's part of your overall cultural experience. And we are going to, as we start the process, we are going to have some instructions as far as what role to play. So for example, I can tell you for your first time, you're going to basically just want to take a look at all the students and do whatever they're doing. So a lot of times it'll be like the teacher will have one textbook and it's actually a student textbook, but because of a lack of funds, that's all that they have. And so the teacher will essentially just be like writing math problems on the board, and the students will be in their notebooks copying it down. So what we ask for the first time that you go is to just like play the role of a student, get out your notebook and do the exact same thing that the students are doing. And so we'll have some kind of tips and tricks and pointers, but make sure that you're maintaining an open mind. And if you do reach, when we talk about Vygotsky and the zone of proximal development, if you reach that danger zone, then that's one of the reasons why myself and Blanca and Soria are there, to be able to kind of debrief and reflect on those moments and make sure that we can learn from them and make it a learning experience. And also the next time, out of the 4 different sessions that we will do with El Hato, it's 2 on each of the weeks, that the next time that you won't be into that level. So let me just see what we got. Oh, frequently. Okay. I just wanted to give myself a little reminder here. Quick reminder that you should have received a copy of your invoice from via Square. So if you haven't received that, or you think it might have gone into your junk folder, or whatever the case may be, please let me know. I also did mention on the email that I sent that I'm happy to set up some sort of a payment plan, or to work with you as far as setting up something with your bank, as far as like a direct transfer that goes out every month or something. So if that's the case, please let me know sooner rather than later, so we could discuss what would be best for you and what would be most convenient for you. But if you also, I can easily send a duplicate invoice to you, where I just have to basically on my end just like hit a button, and then it'll send you another invoice, where I don't want you to feel like you have to search through all of your old emails to access that invoice. So please let me know if and when you're ready for that. Okay, a few frequently asked questions before we get into our questions. I did hear a text message from Ian saying that he's starting to get excited and thinks that he's ready to go, it sounds like, which is awesome. I'm really looking forward to meeting all of you guys. And Ian, I've really enjoyed our conversation on the phone, as well as Blanca has let me know that the sessions that you've been doing via Skype have been really, really great. So thank you for that feedback. And so if you do have questions that you want to go ahead and send over, you can either text them to me, I've got my phone right here, or you can send them to my email, as previously mentioned. But first of all, let's go through a few of these frequently asked questions, one of which is the packing list. We have created a detailed packing list that is available in the shared Google folder. So make sure that you're taking a look at that and taking advantage of the resource before before the day of, because there are some things on there that you may be wondering, like, why do I need to bring a headlamp or something like that? And so, but the reason for that is because a lot of times there's no like bedside lights. And so if you do want to do a little bit of reading before you call it in for the night, then that's something. And also, those midnight bathroom journeys that if you do have a flashlight or a headlamp, then it makes it that much more convenient. A water bottle, an empty water bottle, like a Nalgene or a Hydro Flask or any type of water bottle, because you will be provided with purified water. And whether it's at your family homestay, there will be an unlimited supply of water, or your Spanish school is another place that you can reload on water. So as opposed to having to go out and get a bunch of bottled water, they have those big jugs that you can just go and fill up your water bottle as much as you need to be able to do that. We did talk a little bit on orientation session number 1 about being cautious with the water in Guatemala as far as that which comes out of the sink. So if you didn't get a chance to take a look at that, please revisit that, because that is one of the main things that does happen, is the traveler's diarrhea because of the poor quality of water in Guatemala. So even with things like brushing your teeth, we do advise that you use your bottled water as well as when you're taking the showers, to make sure that you're extra cautious as far as closing your mouth, because that's one area that I ran into. It was actually the year that I was getting married, almost 5 years ago now. And so I was going down to Guatemala with Spanish4Educators right before the wedding, and I was very cautious. But one area that it got me was, I think it was because I can't think of anything else, was when I must have left my mouth open a little bit when I was in the shower, and it must have let a little bit of water in or something, and then I ended up getting sick. So yeah, on the packing list, it does have recommendations like that we strongly suggest that you take a look at. I already mentioned the Google map of Antigua, and we will also be revisiting that in person on day one as far as the orientation walking tour. And then the T-call info we're going to be getting into here in just a sec. So I believe that we are mainly talking about Chris and his family with T-call, and I think, I don't have the list in front of me, but I believe that there's one other either person or group that signed up for T-call. If you are not signed up for T-call, I would highly recommend it. It does, I think it's $600 and something, and that's because we do travel by air, and it's also something that being able to have that airfare, the domestic airfare within Guatemala, does come with a price, as well as it comes fully inclusive as far as your hotel accommodations that are right there at Tikal National Park. So if you're able to, I would recommend doing Tikal. If you're not currently signed up, then let me know if you're interested, and I can add that onto your invoice. But I do need to know sooner rather than later, because I'm working with our vendor that we use that does the T-call trip, and so I need to get them the numbers sooner rather than later. We also have some other weekend excursions that I believe a majority of you all are signed up for, the Lake Atitlan overnight experience. It's a beautiful venue right on the banks of Lake Atitlan. Panajachel is the main city that we will drive into, that we will be transported. That's included in the price there. And then there is it's kind of like a hostel, actually. It's pretty basic as far as they're like single beds, and it's kind of dorm style accommodations. But it's right there on the water, and there's a cool little beach for the kids to play at. And there's a restaurant that the family that owns the place is just, they're incredible cooks, and so you have this amazing fresh fruit and beautiful, awesome, tasty meals with every single meal. Which, by the way, the meals are not included in that price. So everything except for the meals on that Lake Atitlan trip. And then the volcano hike is something that we will be offering on the first Friday of your trip. It's a great chance to be able to be up close and personal to an active volcano. You wouldn't necessarily be able to like see like the actual lava flows and stuff like that, depending on what happens. You never know with volcanoes, right? But as of right now, and as of the last several years, that's not the case. The case is that you will hike up to a place that has vents, and they will give you the opportunity to explore kind of in that area a little bit, but they know where and where not you should be going for safety reasons. And they'll actually give you some marshmallows, so you can say that, one of your bucket list things, I'm sure, is that you were roasting marshmallows from a volcano. So you can check that one off the bucket list. The beach trip to Villarrica is a great experience, but it's not something that, I if you guys are interested in it, then I can definitely make it happen. But I found that the weekend in Lake Atitlan is typically a lot more of a kind of a release, because it's more relaxing, and Villarrica can get a little hot and humid, and it's a black sand beach. So it's one of the places where, with the heat and humidity, you kind of, if you want to go on the sand, you need to have your sandals on and have, your foot gear on. Otherwise you're going to burn your feet. And so we found that the Lake Atitlan experience is a lot more relaxing, and it puts you in a better place at the end of that first weekend. And then I have already received, it looks like Ian has chimed in as far as looks like he's interested in T-Call. That's great to hear, Ian. And then, so we are in the, let me go back to the live stream here. Where am I? And I'm kind of a technology, I'm really interested in it, but I'm not exactly sure if I know everything. So if anybody has any feedback as far as the tech, by all means, let me know if there's any way that you can suggest that this can be better as far as the tech goes. I found that Google Hangouts works pretty well because it streams live to YouTube. So, and then just getting the questions on email or text has always worked fine. So, but I know there's subscription services that, you know, the corporations will do as far as having those go-to meetings and stuff like that. But this is kind of like another alternative to that. So Ian is asking regarding medications that are needed to bring. Will this be an issue to bring? And the answer to that is no. You should be fine as far as that goes, but I guess it depends on which medications, but don't necessarily depend that you're going to be able to get refills, obviously, when you're down there. If you do run into traveler's diarrhea, or they have sometimes where you get a kind of an advanced version of that, where it's kind of this bug that also includes, you know, body aches and stuff like that. So if that's the case, there have been a couple of times that I've gotten that, and you can go to a pharmacy and, you know, your host mother, and I'll be happy to help you out with that as well. But we can set you up with the right medication for that. But as far as any regular medications, make sure that you're bringing an adequate supply so that you have that for the entire time that you're down there. But I don't think it's anything that's an issue as far as, I mean, if we're talking like heavy opioids or something, then that might be an issue. But as far as some of the regular, you know, whether it be heartburn or blood pressure or some of those types of things, like that's never been an issue that I've ever come across. So it should be fine. Electrical plugs. I think that that's something that we went over on the first orientation session, but I'm happy to, I'm not sure. I'm not 100% positive on that. So I think that it's important to repeat. Electrical plugs are the same as the United States. However, there are some locations, especially in some of the family homestays, that they only do the 2 prongs and they don't have the 3 prongs. So especially for your laptop, if you decide to bring your laptop, or any other items that have the 3 prongs, you're going to want to, just in case, go out and get at least 1 or 2 of the converters that will convert 3 prongs to 2, in case you need to plug it into a 2-prong outlet, but is the same plug that we have in the United States with that small exception. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Okay, I'm refreshing my email as we speak to see what other types of questions we have. Okay, looks like we do have a couple here. Okay, so thank you for the positive feedback, Ian. And oh yeah, I'm glad that you're asking some of these. So first of all, for T-Call, we do have others that are going. I don't remember if the Bartlett family signed up, but I know that Chris and, I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce your last name, Klinglebearer, but your family is signed up, and I know you guys are going. So Ian, to answer your question about T-Call, there will at least be another four, because Chris's family is a family of four that will be going to TCAL with Blanca. So Blanca is going to be the facilitator for that one. I wish I could go, but it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of an honor for a local Guatemalan to be able to go to TCAL and to facilitate that experience, because it's kind of almost such a pilgrimage for Guatemalans to be able to do that. So, and also time-wise, with me not being able to bring my family, I thought that it would be better to get back to the States so I can help out my wife, who's going to be home with two kids for a couple of weeks. So I tried to think of other people with that one. And then Ian also asked about an appropriate gift to bring to the host family, which I'm glad that you mentioned that, Ian. So a lot of times what people will do, and it's not expected that you bring a gift for your host family, nor to bring a gift for your Spanish teacher, or for your collaborating teacher at El Hato. But if you do decide that you'd like to do that, and that has happened quite frequently in the past, especially with the host family, I would recommend something that you can connect to yourself, maybe an interest that you have, or related to where you're currently living. So we have had participants from Northern California that have brought something that's related to, like, I think that it was something that was like wine related. You need to check the restrictions on transporting wine. I don't know. I think it might have been like a magnet that said something related to wine or something, because we've also had people that have gotten wine confiscated as far as that goes. So anything that you can kind of connect to your home, even if it's like a little trinket, like a mug or something that says Carbondale or Leadville or San Francisco, or Fort Collins. So that's something that we've had people bring in the past. Also, host families, one thing that you can be certain of, and as far as host families go, especially the fact that you're getting meals provided to you, is that anything that's related to the kitchen, maybe to pay a trip to IKEA or something like that has like endless amounts of kitchen utensils or something small. That is always something that's a hit with the host families, is to bring things related to cooking, and also to be, to realize that the bigger your item is, the less space that you have for your personal items and your items of need. So with your teachers, I would say to stick to that, with your collaborating teachers at El Hato, to stick with the list as far as your items of need. And with also considering that if you get matched with like a preschool or a kindergarten teacher, then you could also take that into consideration versus if you get matched with a 5th or a 6th grade teacher, as far as the developmental level of the students. And so that's something to keep in mind. And then with your Spanish teacher, that's always been a really, really positive experience. And that's been a opportunity to bond and to form a friend, a Guatemalan friend. And so for those Facebook and social media people, a lot of times that's definitely an area where you'll gain a new friend in that area and be able to stay in touch with them. But it's not expected to necessarily bring any type of gift. But if you did, I would say, considering the fact that they are teachers as well and they teach Spanish, and a lot of times with the teachers, more than anything in that area, tip would be the best thing. So included in your tuition is a small propina, is the Spanish term. So that's something that we do include in your tuition. But if you want to also budget a little bit for a small tip for them, then that's something that I think would most likely even go further than any type of material gift that you would get them. And then we also have a question here as far as Ian is like bringing the questions. That's great. I know Chris and his family is also watching, so if you guys have anything, by all means. Okay, so related to, oh, and I do have one from Chris. Perfect. So the last one from Ian is, and if you have anything else, again, totally fine. Transportation. So all of the in-country transportation is provided that you will need. So if you, for example, decide to do something on your own for the weekend that we're there, or obviously in the case of the Klinglebear family where you're going to be going to a different location afterwards, that's obviously something that you need to arrange. But if you're interested in doing that, if you need advice or help or to be connected with a transportation company, then that's something that I'm happy to offer to you. But other than that, the transportation is all provided for as far as any of our cultural activities, which will usually require transportation. So I already mentioned El Hato is about 15 to 20 minutes. We also visit with a Mayan cooperative. There's a woman by the name of Angelica, who's a indigenous Mayan weaver. And so she gives a background on weaving, and she gives a demonstration as far as like a typical Mayan wedding, and you get to do some taste testing as far as some typical food. And the main plate that they are very proud of in Guatemala is a plate called pepian. And so you'll have a chance to be able to do that at the Mayan demonstration, and that also requires transportation. And there's also a market that you can go to at the conclusion of that, where you are able to take a look at some of the hand woven goods and other goods, that some of which are not hand woven, that are definitely machine made. And you'll be able to tell which is which by the price, because the hand woven stuff is definitely a lot more expensive. Anyways, on the transportation side of things. So besides the cultural activities that I mentioned, and we also visit a coffee plantation that will require transportation. But other than that, everything is in Antigua. Everything is within walking distance. So whether it's the reflection that we have a kind of a going away dinner at the end that will invite our families to have dinner at a restaurant, as well as obviously the Spanish school that you go to. All of those items are walkable. And so anything that we do have transportation needs, we have a central meeting point, which is a cathedral called San Francisco, that is within a block, or actually, let me think where you're all staying. Yeah, within 2 blocks tops of all of your houses is our meeting point. So it's really convenient as far as that goes. They're cobblestone roads. It's really beautiful cobblestone roads, but and the sidewalks are a little goofy as far as the leveling, and Guatemala doesn't have as much code enforcement, shall we say, as the United States. So while it is a two block walk, if you do have any health needs or anything that you need to think about, like my mother actually came along on a trip a couple of years ago, and it was before she did her double knee replacement. So that was something that was difficult for her. We just had to budget a little bit of extra time and make sure that she was being helped, up and down off of the sidewalks and stuff like that. So, but everything is so close that even if you do have something like that going on, it's doable. So that's kind of the deal as far as transportation goes. And then Chris, your question. Do we ever talk to our families beforehand? Just curious. Nice. Um, yeah, and so as far as dietary restrictions, so we have already communicated with your families your dietary restrictions. So as far as being, whether it be gluten free or vegetarian or whatever the case may be, that is something that they are aware of. At the same token, some dietary restrictions basically don't exist in Guatemala. And I'm not saying that Guatemalans don't have that, but they probably just maybe don't realize it, or because of the poverty that exists in Guatemala, it's just not a thing. And so even if you were to say gluten-free, for example. That's not, I mean, vegetarian is a little bit easier to comprehend, right? But gluten-free, it's, there's some gray area there. And I can tell you that the tortillas are all corn tortillas, so you don't have to worry about any type of flour tortillas as far as the gluten-free side of things. But if you are interested in communicating with the family and also practicing your Spanish a little bit, then I'm happy to provide you with that family's email address. And, much like my mother and many people that are beyond, north of 55 years old, let's say, the technical restrictions of older Guatemalans are also prevalent. And so there is a chance that either they might not use email very consistently or very well. Or, I know with Amparo, for example, she does really well with Facebook. And so that's one of the great things about Facebook, is to be able to maintain those types of communications, which is also something that's great from my perspective as far as making sure that everybody's safe, because we have had times in the past where there might be like an earthquake or some sort of civil dispute or like a strike or something, and the U.S. news just like takes it and just like takes off with it as far as it's going to be like the end of the world in Guatemala. And then I check in with my Facebook friends and I'm like, hey, I heard that there was this huge strike going on with the bus drivers. What's going on? Is everything okay? It seems like it's going to be like the next civil war. I'm like, oh no, yeah, there was disrupted service, but we're making it work out, and it's not a huge thing. And so that's something to be able to get. I talk with my students a lot about like the primary source perspective, and that's one great thing about social media, is to go to the source as far as like, this is what CNN's telling me, but what's actually going on. And sometimes it's also a part of the country thing, where maybe in like in the highlands of Guatemala there is maybe something going on, but in Antigua everything's still, just fine. So I maintain communication with a lot of my friends down there to make sure that that everybody's safe. So, but yeah, if you are interested in communicating with your family, then please communicate that to me, and I can, by all means, I don't think I have all of the emails right now. I can definitely get that from Blanca, though. Blanca is kind of maintains the pulse on the families at this point. So, but I can tell you that I do have Amparo's, especially since she's kind of like I said, kind of my mother in Guatemala. So, let's see here. As far as questions, we got one more coming in from Chris. Oh yes, I'm glad that you're mentioning this, Chris. So Chris is asking about what the children are going to do throughout the course of this program, and specifically when you are at the El Hato school. And yeah, it's actually, I think arguably it's like a better experience for the kids than for the adults, because when my daughter Iris, and there was another little girl, she was like a year older than Iris. Iris went when she was 3. And then this other girl who was about a year, she was about 4, maybe 5 at the time. And so what we did is we actually put them in the same classroom that they would be in the U.S. So they had a 3-year-old preschool classroom that we put Iris in with. It was also the year that my mother was down. So we had it where my mother was in the classroom with Iris. And so we do plan on being cognizant of that as far as where you will be, and making it so at least one of the parents is with your kid, and that child is with a similar aged group of students, so that they can also be a part of the El Hato experience and getting to know new children and getting to hopefully make a few new friends, and also taking part in like recess with the kids and different things like that, because part of the time that we're there is when they do their snack and recess. So yeah, and then on the private Spanish lessons, that's also something that the children participate in. So they are also matched up with an instructor, and we also try to make it so the instructor has familiarity and experience with children. So when my daughter Iris was doing that, to be able to ask a 3-year-old to be one-on-one Spanish classes for 4 hours is a little bit much. So luckily, Esther, who was her teacher, um, had a lot of experience with young kids, and so they did a lot of activities where they were getting up and making stuff and walking around, and that's one of the things that I think we touched on in orientation number 1 too, is that when you're doing a private Spanish class, there's a lot more flexibility as far as not having to be like confined to the walls of the classroom, where if it makes more sense to check out a museum, if you're studying the different types of foods or colors or whatever, and it would make more sense to like go to the market, then that's something that we have had people do in the past, is to use your time during your Spanish classes to do that sort of thing. The only exception to that is if you're doing the graduate classes, we need to have a little bit more of a pulse on what you're doing with that time, because that goes towards your graduate fulfillment. So that's something that I work with the school director with, as far as the people that end up signing for the credits, just knowing a little bit more. And the example that I gave as far as going to the market to learn about the different foods and stuff would also be a perfectly good example for people that are doing the graduate credits. But we have had some people in the past that, they say we're going to go to Cerro de la Cruz, which is like this really amazing lookout that also has a lot of historical implications. And it's also a really neat little hike to do. And so they end up going there with their teacher, but then their like close friend from the United States, who's also on the trip, ends up going there with their teacher too. And then we find out later that they're like talking English the whole time with each other, and that their instructors are kind of uncomfortable about that. So they end up just like talking Spanish the whole time with each other because they don't know what to do. So that's something where we just need a little bit more of a plan, especially from the graduate credit people, if you decide to leave. But with kids, that's one of the great things, is that they do everything that you do. And so obviously, we're also sensitive to the fact that if a child is not able to do the full 4 hours of Spanish classes, then that's totally fine. That's not something that you're necessarily going to be able to get a refund on or something like that. But that's also one reason why the price is a lot different for children. It's because and that's also not something that we will, receive a refund on. So that's something that just happens. So, but if that's the case, then that's totally fine. And that's also part of like the reflections that will take place as we go through, is to get a pulse on where you and your kids are at as far as comfort level and learning and stuff like that. So let me just do one final check on our questions here. I want to get you guys out of here. Okay. So I think that's it. I don't have any more emails. Don't have any more. Let me just check my texts here. Okay, I think that we're good. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to join me. I'm really excited for the experience, and I think you're going to get a lot out of it and have an incredible time. And so if you have any questions, or if anything comes up, or as you're taking a look at the materials, then please, by all means, get in touch with me. You know how to contact me. And also, if you have your airfare, there is also, like I mentioned, as far as transportation, that is something that is included as your airport pickup. But we do need to get your your arrival information and your departure information when you do get your ticket. I think that the Bartlett family already sent that over to me. So thank you guys for doing that. But everybody else, make sure that when you do purchase your airfare, that you are sending that over to me. Please be cautious as far as the airfare. It's really high right now, so I would not recommend buying something right now. Traveling from Colorado, you should be able to, the sweet spot is anything probably like $700 and below. So if you end up paying in the 800 and above range, I would or if that's what the current offerings are, I would probably hold off. Typically around this time of year, starting in around May, is when the prices tend to drop a little bit. So if you have any questions as far as we talked about this a little bit on orientation number 1, but please let me know. All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate it, and looking forward to meeting you and being with you in Guatemala. So I hope the rest of your school year goes well, and keep in touch. Thanks, guys.